We are live.
All right, welcome to episode 5 of Sharks Talk 916. With you today is me, Chad, and my partner Nolan, coming all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. Now, he's still a Sharks fan. Don't let the move fool you. Got a pretty. It's going to sound like a small agenda today, but I think it's going to take us a long time to talk about it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the late season struggles that we've had here so far. We're going to do a regular season review and wrap up where we're going to give out some awards that mean nothing because no one will ever know they got them. And then a round 1 preview of the playoffs. So just a quick introduction, Sharks Talk 916 brought to you by Sports Talk 916. You guys can follow us on Twitter or Facebook. SportsTalk916.com is also the website where you can see some of our blogging. We're on Twitter at Sharks Talk 916. And then the Facebook page is the Sports Talk 916 Network Facebook page. That's all the things we need to get out of the way now. So let's go ahead and start off. Nolan, welcome back, everybody. We got a show going again. Took a little break while Nolan drove, 3 days or 2 days?
4 days, about 8 to 10 hours a day. We started from Sacramento down to Southern California, and then over to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then Oklahoma City, and finally to Nashville. So made it in one piece.
I've made that drive at least as far as Oklahoma numerous times. That is not a exciting drive. It's
kind of funny taking one interstate pretty much from Southern California to Tennessee. Took I-40 east the whole way. So literally drove the same freeway for 4 days.
Yeah, lots of nice desert out there driving that freeway. So I know you have to stay up late now to watch games, but did you see the game last night?
I did, yes. And I thought that was a lot of people were talking saying, "Oh, that was a meaningless game." I didn't think it was meaningless at all for a lot of reasons. Number one, we got to see Carlson come back for at least one game. He managed to survive without getting hurt. I know you were at the game, Chad. I don't know if you noticed. It seemed like I could tell that, and he even said as much after the game, that he was not purposely giving it 100%. Like you could tell when he would pull up and say, "No, I'm not going to risk it."
Yeah, for sure, and I think that was smart of him.
Yep.
I agree with you. It wasn't a meaningless game. It secured home ice for everybody but Calgary in the West.
Mm-hmm.
And in addition, we got to see Carlson come back and get some skate time, and really, I think, see one of the better performances in the last 8 or so games, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. But yeah, definitely not meaningless, and really good to. It was really fun to be there. Honestly, of course, it's always great to do fan appreciation night. Yeah, we didn't get to stay too late, so we missed some of the talking. But it was fun just to be there. Everybody was, for the most part, in a good mood. I told you on the side a little story. Some of the people, I ran into some of the Shark Attack people from the Facebook page, and they heard the story too. So, yeah. But other than that, it was a good game to be at. So let's jump in. Let's talk about kind of the struggles we've seen the last 8 or 9 games. So obviously the injuries were a big deal for us. Carlson's been out for quite a while. Pabs had a few games that he missed, and then we lost Šimek. How significant do you think those injuries are going forward? Where do you think people are at?
So you and I both agree that the one that gets forgotten is Šimek, right? Going into the season, he was, unless you're really into the Sharks minor league system, you probably didn't even know who he was, or at least weren't very aware and never expected him to be a factor on this team other than maybe a seventh defenseman. But that injury, I think, has been critical because he was sort of served the Paul Martin role for Burns. He's a different style of player than Martin, but much more physical than Paul Martin ever was. But Burns is very eccentric, and only certain guys tend to mesh well with him, and Joaquin Ryan is obviously not one of those. So that kind of threw everything off, and now they've shuffled things around. Looks like Vlasic's going to be with Burns moving forward, at least for now. See how that goes. But I thought that was a huge loss because it screwed up pretty much every single pair because they had to pretty much change all of them at that point.
Yeah. So Steve Kroper's asking, like, was Carlson the difference last night? And I think that with Šimek out, I think Carlson did make a big difference last night because we get defensive pairings back kind of to where or close to where we expect them to be. I think that Braun Ryan pairing is still kind of a weird pairing, but Vlasic seems to be doing all right playing with Burns. He makes up for some of Burns' kind of questionable defensive decisions. And then Dylan and Carlson, I think, is a great combo. And while Carlson's offensive play wasn't great last night, like I didn't feel like he was contributing a ton in the offensive zone, I do think he made a number of good defensive plays. There are a couple of pucks he knocks down. He definitely shows that we're a more solid defensive core, I think, with him in the lineup than we are without, for sure.
Yeah, I thought the first couple of shifts, he had a few chances in the ozone. You could just see his creativity right away, but I think more than anything last night, it was just him being back just was an energy injection in the team. Having him back in the lineup, I wasn't at the game like you were, but from my understanding, the crowd was pretty jacked up when he took the ice for warm-ups. So I think it was just an injection of energy regardless of on the ice. And it seemed like as the game went on, the first period he had quite a bit of jump, and then he sort of ran out of gas, which is to be expected. His conditioning is not going to be there quite yet.
But I think he's smart, right? So one thing I'll say is he, like his quote said, right, he knew he didn't have necessarily a full tank of gas to go out there.
Yep.
And he makes smart plays. He makes smart decisions. He doesn't pinch if he doesn't have the energy. He's not going to necessarily make a dumb mistake because he's tired out there. So he's definitely compensating. And I think the question is going to be, what's his recovery time like, right? So he played last night. Is he feeling great by Wednesday, or is it going to take him a little longer?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Šimek, like to go back to your first point, I think that's the biggest, honestly, loss injury wise. And because when Carlson was out, we were still winning.
Yeah, they won like 7 in a row without him.
Yeah, and then as soon as Šimek goes down, the D pairings just go to crap. And I'm surprised by that. I mean, I think they were saying, was it him they gave like
rookie of the year?
Yeah, rookie of the year too, which I think more than deserving.
For sure.
And never would have thought he was such a big part. He's kind of just getting plugged in. We were trying different guys out, and once he got in there, he was great. He was a great fit.
Yeah, and then they did have a few other injuries. You mentioned Pavelski. He missed about 6 to 8 games. Kane missed some time both due to injury and the unfortunate loss of his soon-to-be-born daughter. So they've had injuries off and on, but I mean, still, even with the injuries they had and some of the guys that were out, to lose 7 in a row, especially considering the teams that they were losing to, Florida, LA, Anaheim, Detroit, and Chicago, it seemed like every game you turn on and within 10 minutes they were down 1 or 2-0 against Chicago. I remember they went down 3-0 early.
Yeah, although I do think it seemed to be an NHL-wide like flu almost that attacked a lot of the top teams. I mean, Anaheim and Detroit had and LA, all three of them had some interesting wins against top teams in the end of the stretch there. So while I started out kind of really worried about it, as I saw that it wasn't just impacting the Sharks, Calgary had some losses, Vegas had some losses in there. I started to be less worried about the Sharks specifically, and kind of maybe it's just end of the year pushes from teams that have nothing to lose, and a little bit of sluggishness from teams that know they're going into the playoffs. And I don't know. You get a little. I'm assuming you get a little nervous around that time of year. I was surprised for a while there. I was worried we were going to drop out of second, right? But luckily Vegas kept losing too. So
yeah, Fleury went down, which set Vegas back quite a bit, and I think Vegas had kind of resigned themselves to the third seed in the division, so they sort of took their foot off the gas and arrested anyone who was banged up. But you're right, other top teams have struggled as well. Winnipeg and particular has had a rough go at it the last few weeks. Even Nashville's been up and down. Calgary, not as much, but I mean, most importantly, the Sharks Vegas has lost, I think, 7 out of their last 8 now, including last night versus LA. So, and Fleury's been back the last 2 games, but has lost both of those. So we'll get into that matchup here in a little bit. But for me, I do think it was really important that they took care of both Vancouver on Thursday and then the win yesterday to sort of wash the bad taste out of their mouth of that 7-game losing streak that they had going into that. I know they had won, I think, 1 game before that and lost a couple more, but I do think it was important to at least get some positive mojo momentum going into Wednesday. I mean, the guys would have told you, it doesn't matter, we'll reset,
Sure.
It's a whole new season, all the cliches, but I don't buy that. Sports is a mental game, and I mean, I don't think they would have gone into Wednesday feeling very good about themselves if not for the last couple of games. Even though they weren't dominant in either game, it's just important to get back on the winning side.
And for me, I think the biggest thing I saw was Jones. So, I mean, we 2 or fewer has been the kind of the mantra that I've tweeted a bunch, and I know that Brody brings it up all the time. But I mean, they're 32-0 when they give up 2 or less goals, and the last 2 games they gave up 2 or less goals. And last night's one of them, I think Jones probably should have made a better play on. But the other goal, he didn't have any way to see it. Braun was more of a hindrance than a help in that goal. So there was there were no soft goals last night. And I don't even think there were really soft goals against Vancouver either. So I like to see him playing a little better. That's what we really need going into the playoffs, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 goals last time, he had a breakaway against one of the best players in the league, McKinnon. And then the first goal was kind of a broken play. And with broken plays like that, you're out of position, you're scrambling, and it's through traffic. It was just kind of a fluky play.
Yeah.
I remember watching that play, and I kind of saw the goal coming the whole time the play was developing. But all right, so they've gotten through the rough stretch in the season here. So we want to kind of look back at the season as a whole. The Sharks sort of stole our thunder last night by announcing their team MVP, but Chad and I have a few other categories as well. I guess we'll start with the negative. In terms of biggest disappointment this year, and we're going to do like a first star, second, and third star. I guess for this, it would be first dud, second stud, or dud, or first black hole, whatever you want to call it.
Biggest dud, second biggest dud.
Right. Yeah. So who are your bottom 3, I guess, for biggest disappointment?
So I'll work my way up. So actually, I have my third star as Pete DeBoer.
Really? Okay.
And not like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fire Pete bandwagon guy. Like, I actually think he's doing a good job with the team, but there's some decisions that I found really questionable throughout the season. His love of Haley, which we'll get into some when we talk about who's going to play in the playoffs, but there's times he's playing Haley that just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, even last night, last night you're shorthanded, right? You don't have Timo, but I mean, the Avs aren't a physical team, really. They're not out there laying big hits and getting in fights. And Haley looked last night like he just looked terrible. Every time he had the puck, I just
he got that empty net goal, Chad. That was a huge.
Yeah, I'm sure Haley fans everywhere will be tweeting about how great he is because he's got 2 goals on the season now. I don't know if the other one was empty net, but this one was. So,
his first as a Shark. Yeah.
But so that decision, I think letting Carlson come back when he did, I think is a poor decision, and I do think the coach has to step up and say, "Look, I get that you're the athlete, but you can't come back out." And even in the game where he leaves, he comes back to the game, right? Plays clearly injured, goes back to the back, and then the next period he's back out on the ice again. Who lets their player come out like that? So I just there's been some questionable decisions, I think, from DeBoer. Obviously, I'm a Donskoy fan too, and I think that there's times when he's benched him instead of just bumping him down a line. Or there's times when, we talk about LeBlanc, and for a long time it was, well, he contributes things that aren't necessarily scoring goals, and so it's good to have him out there. Well, Donskoy does the same thing, but you don't give him the same leeway when it comes to play. So,
and he's defensively responsible.
Yeah, much more defensively responsible. So that's where I've got Pete there. I think Pete's a great coach. He's re-signed. I think he's great for the Sharks. I just think he made some questionable. He was disappointing to me a little bit this year. My second star is the guy whose jersey I'm wearing right now, Marc-Edouard Vlasic. He stepped up definitely. The second half of the season, he's been a lot better since the All-Star break. But I think that he definitely had issues early on in the season. One, he wasn't willing to even talk about it. Kind of just denied that it was even existing. And then second, just you expect more out of him. He's the guy that you expect to be your core, tough defenseman, and he just wasn't. And I think that's a big hole when it's not there. We'll talk about surprises, about people who maybe stepped up and filled that spot a little bit. But and then my top one is Jonesy. I just think overall, when you look at his whole season, it's been a bit disappointing. There's been a lot of soft goals that have come in. I get there's been some bad defense in front of him, but there's definitely times when he was in a position to make the difference, and he didn't. And that's what you need your goalie to do. That's what you need your goalie to be when you go into the playoffs. If you look at Fleury, Quick, or those guys that do well and seem to go far in playoff play, it's because they make those outrageous saves sometimes when they need to. And I feel like that's something he has not been great at this season. So, what do you got?
Your first and second dud are identical to mine. I have Jones as the biggest disappointment and Vlasic as the second. So I will go into those again. The third I had was Carlson, just because, not because he has been poor when he played, just because he hasn't been on the ice. And going into the season, I mean, the expectations are about as high as you can get, and it's just been disappointing as a fan, not to be able to see him out there. And he did struggle the first month or so, and then he had a good, month and a half, and then he went down with injury. He's pretty much been out since then. So it's not really, a negative statement towards his play, just the fact that it's been a disappointment that he hasn't been on the ice for a third of the season.
And that's the only reason he's not my number 3. I mean, that literally was the determination I made was just that it's no fault of his own, really, right? Like it's disappointing as a fan, but I agree. Like that's a rough one. And I think there's other people who could have made the list for various reasons, but yeah, I think 1 and 2 are definitely solid picks. So this time you go first so that I don't steal all your thunder. What are your biggest surprises of this season?
Biggest surprise, let's see. Third star I would probably give to Timo Meier. Obviously, he's been highly touted, and we knew he had a lot of potential, but I don't think anyone saw the first 2 months that he had in the season really coming out and happening. So he really burst on the scene. He cooled off the rest of the year, but I mean, still to have a 30-goal a year and basically his second full season in the NHL was pretty impressive. Second, I got Brendan Dillon. I think Dillon's been the most consistent defenseman for the Sharks the entire season, which we've talked about on this show before, that he tends to improve every single year, but I think this has been his biggest step forward, and I don't know how much of that goes to the chemistry he has with Carlson, but he's been good even when Carlson hasn't been out there, so Dillon would be my second choice. And then my first choice would be the guy we talked about earlier, Schmick. Again, he came out of nowhere, so naturally he's the biggest surprise. I mean, going into camp, he was expected to be, in a battle with Tim Heed for maybe the 7th D-man position, possibly 8th, and then he turned out to be a critical cog for the 30 or so games that he played before his season unfortunately came to an end. Yeah,
I've got the same 3. Honestly, I figured we might end up the same on this one. I mean, Dylan, and we talked in one-on-one and on Twitter, and we've talked before about plus minus, it not being the end all be all of stats. But I mean, when you're a plus 19 and you've got 22 points, Like it's not like Dylan's out there, getting assists and getting goals to make up for bad defensive play. I mean, the guy has just been solid. And if you'd gone back, if you'd gone back to the Dylan Pollock era and told me that there'd be a season where Dylan would be honestly the best defenseman we have on the team, I would have laughed at you and thought you were crazy. And I think the fact that he was consistent even with Carlson out shows that it's not just he's playing with a good D pairing, but that he's actually been a solid defenseman this season.
Right.
And it's weird to say that. I mean, I was talking to my wife last night, and I can't believe how much I've been cheering on Dylan this season, because I never would have thought I would do that. But and then, like you said, and we talked about, Šimek is just out of nowhere. I mean, I didn't know who the guy was, and I try to pay at least some attention to who's down in the lower level, and just couldn't believe. And I'd say there's an honorable mention on there of Heed. I didn't expect him to be as good as he was when he came in. He's not as impressive as the other three on the list, obviously, but when he was pairing up with Vlasic, that was a pretty good pairing, and I was kind of surprised at his productivity. So,
and I have a feeling our pick for team MVP are probably the three same guys as well, maybe a different order.
Well, what's your number 3?
Number 3 is Brent Burns for me.
Okay, what's your number 2?
Pavelski.
All right, and number 1 you got Hurdle, I'm guessing.
Yep.
All right, so we're more alike than I thought we'd be.
Yeah.
I'll talk a little bit about why I've got them there, and then you can jump in. So I mean, Burns, I feel like you can't keep him off the list.
Right.
The guy's got the most points on the team. He's more, I would say, assist oriented this season than he's been before. Less goals, more assists, going for the tips a lot more often.
Yeah.
But his offensive play is
just the tip, Chad. Just the
tip. That's probably what Pavs gets told every night. You can't. I don't think you can have an MVP list and not put Brett Burns on it. But I think there's guys who are a little more deserving. I think seeing Pavs, how the team played when Pavelski was out of the lineup, he just adds so much, even if it's just in the locker room.
Yep.
He adds so much to the team that they look lost sometimes when he's not around. And I don't know what they're going to do. We've talked a little bit about the possibility of him not being signed next year. I don't know what they do without him. I'm kind of scared of a team without Pavelski in there.
I think that conversation, has changed quite a bit from when we talked about it 3 months ago, both because of how he's played and the Carlson situation. So I still wouldn't consider it a guarantee that Pavelski comes back, but I think the chances are much higher now than they were 2-3 months ago.
I definitely think if you look at the impact of those two being out of the lineup, it's clear that Pavelski being out is a much more impactful thing than Carlson being out was, right? So
it was. I mean, is it coincidence? Is it not? It's debatable, but
it's hard to say. And then Hurdle, I mean, the kid's a beast. At that center position, with his big body, with his ability to handle the puck, is ridiculous. You've said before, and I've re-quoted you, I think he has a magnet in his stick, and there's metal in that puck, because you see some of the moves he makes when he stick handles, and it's just ridiculous. I don't know how guys don't get the puck away from him, but they don't.
Well, in the last few years, I mean, he's tried to make so many of those plays, and that was fizzled out. Either he lost control of the puck or shot it wide. And this year, I don't know what the difference has been, whether he trained extra hard in the offseason or what, but I mean, he's finishing everything and just completely controlling and driving play. And I mean, most nights he's their best player. And a lot of nights he's the best player on the ice amongst both teams.
Yeah, I think that I really think it's a maturity thing, right? I think before he would always try to make the move. He would always try to make the play. I think now he's gotten better at knowing, when do I drive the puck? When do I take it to a corner and make a play on a body? Like you see more of that in his game, where he's not just driving to the net every time anymore. He's really taken that center position very well. He's
skating really well too. So I mean, his knee's probably fully recovered by now from all the injuries he's had over the last couple of years. So it's probably health, confidence, and then confidence goes a long way. I mean, you have success early in the year, and you just build on it and go from there. I mean, look at the guys that aren't scoring, and how much longer it takes them to get out of a rut just because of the confidence factor.
Well, and I think you have to say that he does, to some extent, what Joe Thornton does, right? As far as what it means to be a center, he makes the guys with him better players. Kane, before he was paired up with Hurdle, was having a terrible season, and people were talking about, did we pay too much for Kane? Like, is he really what we thought we were buying? But then once you put him on that Hurdle line, now he's got 30 goals, and he scored his 30th goal last night, right?
Yeah.
And I'd say Donskoy's early season was the same. Like when Donskoy was hot, it was on that Hurdle line.
And then you had the Timo, Couture, and Hurdle line too.
Yeah,
which was dominant for quite a while.
Yep. And even Nyquist, right? Like Nyquist was struggling at the beginning. You get him on that Hurdle line, he's doing better now, scoring goals.
Whoever is whatever lines they roll out every night, Hurdle's line typically is their best line. So
yeah.
All right.
Well, that was it.
MVP.
That was easy.
Any other random categories you want to throw in there?
Or best? What is it? Flow. Best flow.
So you have Sorensen, Carlson, and Burns, I guess, are your candidates.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go Sorensen personally.
See, I'm gonna go with Carlson because I think that the mustache increases the flow. Like the pirate stash just makes it better.
The Rolly Fingers mustache.
Yeah, the Rolly Fingers mustache.
That's what I always think of. But
he should release his own mustache wax, like a
right
EK65 stash wax.
He does a lot of promos on Instagram for credit cards and suits and stuff. So hey, you never know.
I'll send that to him as an idea. Yeah, I don't know. You have any other categories?
No. I mean, I think we've covered all that. So the last topic is a first round preview against Vegas. I see we have I don't think Ronnie's still with us, the resident Vegas fan on this podcast, but yeah, so first round matchup versus Vegas. You and I have been dreading this matchup pretty much all season long. Hoped they would be able to avoid it. But a part of me does think that having it in the first round is probably better than the second round. Of course, the downside, as we've talked about before, is that means you get Calgary in round 2, most likely, assuming you're able to take down Vegas.
Yeah. So definitely not the matchup I wanted, but we talked about how you're going to have to go through them at some point, likely, right? I mean, maybe if you'd had a Calgary Vegas matchup, you only have to go through one of those two teams. Right. I guess that's the downside is now you're probably going to have to beat both in order to go. But there's just something about Vegas that we don't play well there. Although Jones has a decent record against both Calgary and Vegas this season. But yeah, what do you think? I'm not as worried as I used to be. I feel like we got a good shot at beating Vegas going on to the next round. I'm hoping Timo's okay. That's the one injury we didn't really talk about. It was one of those injuries where the quote was, if it was a playoff game, he'd be playing. But that doesn't mean he's 100%. That means he's less than 100%, but willing to play no matter what.
Is my video still on? It's showing blacked out on my end.
I see you. Yeah.
Okay.
We all still have to look at your face.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But no, if you'd asked me a week or two ago when the Sharks were in the middle of losing 7 in a row, I would say there's no way in hell they're going to beat Vegas. I feel a little bit better for a couple of reasons. One, they won the last 2 games. Carlson looked pretty good last night, much better than I expected, to be honest with you. Even though he wasn't going full force, he was moving around much better than I anticipated compared to the last 2 times he came back from injury. He looked like a grandma nursing an injury. So that was a positive sign. And then the other positive is that Vegas has been just as crappy lately that the Sharks have been. And Fleury's just coming back from an injury, so we may not see, the Fleury that we saw last year, which if we see the Fleury we saw last year, I don't see the Sharks winning just because Jones has been
pretty awful this year, and I don't see him suddenly becoming a good goalie overnight again.
Yeah, I don't want to get in. Definitely don't want to get into a goalie battle with 100% Fleury, right? But
Right.
so 90% Fleury is like a normal goalie, so we stand a decent chance in that. I kind of agree with you. Although, what I just blanked on the backup.
The Vegas is back. Malcolm
Yeah.
Subban.
Thank you, Subban. Subban played well when he was in for
Yeah.
Fleury. He played solid, and I wouldn't if Fleury doesn't show that he can play, if he can't play at the level needed for playoffs, I think they make a quick switch and they put Subban in because he was pretty solid at the end there and up until Fleury's return.
He was. He just didn't have the experience. I mean, I'm sure as long as Fleury is healthy, he'll be in there. I mean, if he gets shellacked, I mean, the series is probably over regardless of who they put in net. But yeah, no, that's the biggest concern I have going in is Jones versus Fleury, and I think the Sharks have to hope that Fleury's not playing at the top of his game. If he is, then it's an uphill battle. I was looking at the standings this morning. If you look at every team in the NHL that made the playoffs, the Sharks gave up more goals than any other playoff team in the league. And that's not a good sign. They also scored the second most, tied with Calgary. Tampa Bay is the only team that had more. But the playoffs tends to be more of a defensive game, and this has been more of an offensive team. So that could spell trouble, especially against a good goalie if Fleury is himself.
Yeah, I don't think you can score your way out of bad defense in the playoffs. I just don't think it's gonna work.
Especially Vegas too. Vegas is such a momentum team. You get behind and it just snowballs on you real quick. They're a team that can put you down 3 or 4 goals in a couple of minutes. That's what the Sharks saw last year in a couple of the games in the playoff series.
So Steve's got a good question, and I think it's a good segue into kind of what are the keys to success against Vegas, other than obviously Jones versus Fleury. But he says, it comes down to mental mistakes for us, and we need to hit them. And I think that's, for me, I've said it all season, but team defense is a big deal. We need forwards to play defense as well as defensemen. And the biggest place I think we need to do that is against this team is in the neutral zone. We spend way too much. We let guys fly through the neutral zone. We tend to get back and let them come into us. I think with Vegas, you can't give them that momentum. You've got to be hitting guys as they come across the ice.
Yeah, and their fourth line especially is extremely physical. Ryan Reeves, William Carrier, and then Bellemare, I think, is the fourth line center, sometimes third line. But the last time these two teams played in the regular season, that was the first time I've really seen the Sharks push back against Vegas physically. And that kind of takes us into one of the questions you and I had is, who slots into the fourth line for the Sharks? Is it Donskoy? And we're assuming, for all argument's sake, that Timo is back for game 1, which DeBoer said he would be yesterday. In fact, during the post game yesterday where they were giving away their jerseys and stuff, Timo didn't even have his wrist wrapped up or anything, so yeah. I'm assuming he's good to go. So assuming Timo's in, then the fourth line, I mean, Melker and Goodrow are going to play regardless of what anyone thinks. So it really comes down to Donskoy versus Haley. Obviously, Haley is the more physical player, and against a team that has a very physical fourth line, I could most certainly see DeBoer going that route. I think you and I both agree we don't want to see that happen, but I would not be surprised at all if that is the case.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, we agree. We don't want to see Haley. I think that DeBoer plays Haley, and I think he has at least a decent argument for it. One is that Haley is physical, and 2 is that you don't have Šimek. So you need more physicality out there somewhere.
Right.
Like you could say, hey, we've got Šimek. We'll put Burns and Šimek up against, their bigger lines, and he can be the physical force out there. But the only other one I'd say is you try to match up. I think Hertl's line can be physical, but I don't know that you match up Hertl's line with their fourth line because you don't want them getting. You don't want one of them getting hurt.
Well, and DeBoer historically does not really believe in line matching. He always says, "No, I just roll my lines, and who's out there is who's out there." When you're at home, you get last change, you can do a little bit more, but compared to a lot of NHL coaches, he's not that concerned about line matching. He does, though, to your point, match the D pairs up against the opponent's lines much more often. Like, historically, Braun and Vlasic have always taken on the other team's top line, which that'll be interesting to see because, it appears they're going to go with Burns, Vlasic, Carlson, Dillon. And then our last question, does Braun play with either Ryan or Heed?
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough choice because I haven't seen him play a lot with either one of them.
Yeah.
If it's just a question of Ryan or Heed, I would say Heed normally. But with defensive pairings, a lot of times it's so much about who plays well together. And if it was Vlasic, I'd say Heed in a second because the two of them seem to play really well together. But with Braun, I think you start with Heed. He generates a little more offense than Ryan does and still plays decent defense. And then Ryan's really been struggling in his time to the point where they brought Middleton up and let Middleton play some games.
Yeah.
So I think you start off with Heed, and if he struggles, then you try Ryan. But that's going to be the D pair to me. That's going to be interesting to see is whoever's paired up with Braun. Like
that
you said,
could be a real liability for the Sharks if that doesn't mesh. I mean, they could shuffle a deck again at that point, put Braun and Vlasic back together, and put I don't want Burns with Ryan. We've seen that experiment too much. My guess is that Ryan initially draws in based off of last night's lineup. I think last night's lineup is pretty much their playoff lineup, except for sub out Tino for either Donkey or Haley. So I think Ryan probably goes in initially, and I think the thought process there is when Ryan is playing well, he plays a pretty similar style to Vlasic, and obviously Braun is super familiar with Vlasic, so theoretically it should work, but as you point out, Heed has been the more effective player the last few weeks. So,
well, my problem is you have Carlson who can generate offense, you have Burns who can generate offense, so you have those two pairings. You've got a defensive guy and an offensive guy. Braun's not bringing anything to the table offensively.
No, definitely not.
So if you have Ryan, then you're back to more of a classic style Braun Vlasic straight up defensive pairing.
Right.
But I'm not confident in either one of them enough to say like, okay, you've got a solid D pair with those two together.
No.
At least with Heat, I know he's going to get some assists. He's going to shoot the puck. And Braun can play the line, I guess.
And then, of course, the other concern is, righty. So Braun would be forced to play the left side, which he can do, but it's definitely not his strength by any means. And I don't know. I mean, I've never played in the NHL, so I can't claim to know how big of a deal that is, but sometimes I think it's overblown, the whole righty-lefty thing. I know DeBoer's a huge fan of it and always does it when possible, but I don't know if it's as big of a deal as people make it out to be.
What do you think is there any chance that you see Ryan and Heed and that Braun sits out?
No, I'm not unless there's an injury. For a number of reasons. One, they have a lot of respect for Braun and they value him pretty highly. I don't think they see him as a liability as some Sharks fans do. And number two, you don't roll out a pair that inexperienced come playoff time.
Sure.
Ryan, I want to say he got some playoff action last year playing with Burns, right? If I'm not mistaken. I don't think Heat has ever played a playoff game to my knowledge.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
So, but yeah, that's asking for trouble to me. Braun alone should be in there just because of his experience, and you could utilize him on the penalty kill much more than those other two guys.
I guess maybe that's another thing I think of. So I think you and I both agree that we don't think Braun's coming back next year.
No, he's gone. Yeah.
And I think he's the guy who's most likely to come in and take a slot there. So do you play Heed some just to get him some playoff experience this season?
No, your entire focus right now is this season because they may not have a team this good ever again, especially if Carlson leaves. So you can forget about next year right now. It's
all in for this year and see what happens. So, but next year, I mean, he can definitely. He's a free agent as well, but there's a good chance he probably comes back. And I mean, obviously, the defense next year hinges a lot on what happens with Carlson. So,
Yeah.
I think they'll chase another impactful defenseman if he departs. But back to the playoff series. The other key, I think, to this series is, I mean, the Sharks have home ice advantage, and they've got to take advantage of it. Otherwise, it's not home ice advantage. Thinking about this series last night, I almost want to go as far as saying if the Sharks don't win the first 2 games, they're going to lose the series. Just because if they go to Vegas 1-1, you pretty much have to win one of those games in Vegas. Otherwise, you come back home down 3-1. If they get down 3-1, it's over. You're not coming back against Vegas down 3-1. So I think would be absolutely critical if they could win the first 2 games. I think they'll win the series. But if they go to Vegas 1-1, they better find a way to get a win in Vegas before they come back.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I love about hockey is that nothing's impossible, right? I mean, if you talk about, we're going to get into the bracket in general, but if you talk about wild card versus 1 matchups, like, while I may not pick a wild card, in all honesty, I think there's a chance the wild card comes in and upsets in hockey. But if any game goes 7 games, I feel like Sharks Vegas is the game that's going to go 7.
Series,
series that's going to go 7. I have them winning. Basically, I have the home team winning every game. Is how I see it, and
that's how the conference finals against Nashville played out 3 years ago when they got to the Cup.
And then if we carry on, right? Let's say we beat Vegas. We assume we play Calgary. We have to beat Calgary at their home. That's the only way we get out of that series. And then you're talking most likely to me Nashville, and you want home ice, right? Like, home ice is going to be, I think, a huge deal for us to get out of the West.
Yeah, and I'm not really worried about the Sharks winning on the road, other than against Vegas or Nashville too. Nashville is just as tough a building as Vegas is, and the Sharks have had just as many issues in Nashville as they have in Vegas, which ironically is probably 2 of the 3 teams they would have to go through to get to the Cup. But yeah, home ice probably is going to be more important in this series than any other series they play, assuming they can get through and move on. So.
And last season I wouldn't have said that, because last season our road record was like amazing. But I think that this season that they're going to need every advantage they can get.
It's just because of the opponent. I mean, they finally won a game in the regular season in Vegas earlier this year, and don't get me wrong, Vegas has had no issues playing in San Jose, so it's not like, the Sharks have a huge advantage at home. It's just they have a huge disadvantage on the road is the bigger issue. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens. So we did want to spend a little bit of time. Well, I guess we'll do predictions on this series first, and then we'll look at the other series around the league before we wrap up. So what's your prediction for, or do you want to save that one for last? What do you think?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I've got, plus this is the one I feel good about. I've got Sharks beating Vegas. I do have it going 7 games. I think the home team wins in each game. Unless like you said, here's what I could see. If we lose one of the first 2, then I think we could win the first in Vegas, that we could get be so heated from the loss but even then I don't like playing from behind in the series. That's what I consider that. If you're 1-1 after your 2
feels like you're behind, yeah.
Yeah, you're behind. So I think it goes 7 games. I think the home team wins every game.
Yeah, I have it going 7 games as well. I'm kind of torn between being a fan and being an analyst. As an analyst, I want to pick Vegas to win, but the fan in me will not let me do that. Like I said, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said Vegas in 6.
As the bracket goes on, I go from fan to realist. So
right,
I'm sorry out at fan right here.
My realist says Vegas wins, but the fan of me agrees with you. The Sharks in 7. And I do have extra hope because of the things we talked about. Fleury's been out. Vegas has struggled just as much as the Sharks, if not more. So they're not exactly firing on all cylinders either at the moment.
And if you don't think every guy in that room wants to win one for Jumbo, I think
Yeah,
it's
but I mean, hasn't that been a motivation the last 4 or 5 years? And
yeah, but like you said though, I think they realize just like everybody else that this is the best team they're going to play with,
yeah,
especially the Jumbo's going to get to play with.
yeah.
Um,
That also just adds pressure too, though, right? Because they know if it doesn't happen this year, it's going to be an uphill battle.
yeah, that's true.
So, but I'll stick with Sharks in 7 just to make myself feel better. But I will not be surprised at all if the Sharks go down. I think if the Sharks win the series, it's a long series. I think if Vegas wins the series, it could be a fairly short series. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, if they come in and win 2 in San Jose, I think it's just over in 4 at that point. So,
well, if we get swept, I mean, good Lord.
Yeah.
Let's not go there.
Let's stay in the Pacific. So, Calgary and Colorado.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see Colorado putting up much of a challenge. Colorado did give Nashville quite a run in the first round last year, and they do have a dominant line in McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen, assuming he's back. And you in a playoff series, it is possible for one line to take off and win a series, but Calgary's probably been the most. Well, I mean, obviously the best team in the West based off their record, and they've been the most consistent team throughout the entire season, probably in all the NHL other than Tampa Bay and Boston. So I have Calgary taking care of that series. I'm going to say 5 games. I don't see Colorado putting up much of a fight.
Yeah, I've got Calgary in 5. I think Colorado wins 1 in Colorado.
Yeah.
But I think other than that, I think Calgary wins at home and then loses probably the first one in Colorado, realizes, all right, these guys, we can't just mess around, and then wins the series. So
it's going to be one interesting factor there is Calgary doesn't have a whole lot of playoff experience with this group. I mean, they've made the playoff a few times the last few years, but just as kind of a 7 or 8 seed, and they weren't expected to do anything. This is the first time in a very long time that they have expectations going into the playoffs. So I'll be curious to see how they handle the pressure, especially you can't compare the pressure any team faces to a Canadian team. The media up there is, I mean, and a Canadian team hasn't won the cup in 20, 30 years. So any Canadian team that makes the playoffs, the pressure on them is enormous, which doesn't help the situation at all.
Especially when you're one of 3 Canadian teams.
Yeah. So you got Calgary and Toronto and Winnipeg are the only 3 that made it. So
yeah. So I mean, it's to win for your country, right? There's not many opportunities. So move to Central. We'll do what I think is the easy one. So Nashville, Dallas.
Go ahead. I'll let you take the reins on that one.
I've got Nashville, but I have them in 6. So I think Dallas is better than they've played. And they're one of 2 teams that I have on here. I have one in the East also that I think could do a better showing in the playoffs than they did in the season.
Agreed. Yeah. This is definitely an upset potential series. I don't see it happening. I think Nashville takes care of business, but I would not be surprised if Dallas somehow pulls it out. But I'm with you. I got Nashville in 6. And Nashville really, on paper, should not have an issue in this series, but Pecorine, their goalie, has typically struggled in the playoffs, and that's probably been the one reason they haven't won the cup the last few years, because they've had a really good team the last couple of years. So assuming he doesn't shit the bed, then I think Nashville takes care of business in 6 games as well.
Well, I think Dallas fought hard to get in. I mean, I think that they, the comments from the owner, GM, whatever, CEO, I think they worked. I mean, I think it made his team pissed off, and maybe they're trying to prove to do it, to spite him. But they definitely have something to prove, and I think that puts Nashville a little bit on their heels, and they're going to need to dig in and really play.
Well, and no one expects them to win, right? So you always have that underdog advantage and mentality where you're playing free and loose, whereas Nashville's, expected to compete for a cup. So
yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, the worst thing Nashville can do is assume they're gonna be able to win this series.
Yeah, my understanding is Nashville has struggled against Dallas this year, so I don't
think they will take them lightly by any stretch. But
And then the other one, Winnipeg, St. Louis, which is an interesting matchup, I think.
yeah, go ahead.
I actually have St. Louis winning it, and I think it will. I have it as 5. I think it could easily go more than that. It could go 7, but I think that the Blues have struggled a little bit, and I think they kind of are going to pull their heads out of their butts and get out there and play.
Yeah, St. Louis was a really interesting story. So in the offseason, they made quite a few big moves. The main thing they did was bring in Ryan O'Reilly, center from Buffalo. They had big expectations going into the year, and they had an awful first 2 or 3 months of the year. They were near the bottom of the conference with LA and Anaheim, and then the last 2 or 3 months they've been on a tear, and they were 1 point away from winning their division.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy. The Central Division, Winnipeg, Nashville, and St. Louis were all separated by 2 points. That all came down to last night, and they all 3-1. So Nashville took the division. Winnipeg got second. St. Louis ended up in third. So Winnipeg will have home ice against the Blues. But it's funny. I was talking about earlier. We talked about some of the contenders that have struggled. St. Louis has been by far the hottest team in the West. So Winnipeg's going to have their hands full. I still do think Winnipeg pulled it out just because their talent up front is pretty stacked with Scheifele and Wheeler and Line and all those guys. So I think Winnipeg takes care of business, and I think the experience they got last year going to the conference finals and losing to Vegas makes them a little bit hungry, and they want to get back there and try to get all the way this year as opposed to falling short.
we might need to do NHL.com brackets and compete with each other, see how we do.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is I look at all these series, and we'll get to the Eastern Conference in a second, but I have a hard time picking many upsets just because I feel like this year in the NHL especially is very top-heavy. There's 4 or 5 really good teams, and after that it's kind of secondary to me.
So if we talk about – let's move to the East and talk about the game that I think has no chance of an upset.
Right.
Lightning and the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have to take a new team photo because no one knows who's on their team.
Right. Yeah, and they barely made the playoffs, I think was the bigger story there. Is they made all those trades for Duchesne and Dzingel and a couple other guys they brought in. But I was kind of the asshole in me was rooting against them to miss the playoffs just because I thought all those trades are so stupid for a team that probably has a minimal chance to get out of the first round, let alone further than that. So I wanted the GM to sort of pay a heavy price, but I guess there's the second best thing is, hey, you get to play Tampa Bay. Congratulations. So good luck with that. Tampa shouldn't have any problems. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they sweep, but I'll say 5 games. I'll give Columbus.
I have Tampa. I have Tampa as a sweep. I don't think, for all the reasons you said, I think Columbus basically rebuilt their team at the trade deadline, and they've got some good goaltending, but I don't think they stand a chance against Tampa. And I think Tampa's on a roll. I mean, their season has been ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a record season. I don't remember. I saw some stat last night that they've got more wins and more points than any team in like the last 20 years or something. So
yeah. Okay, so same division, I guess. Boston, Toronto.
Boston and Toronto. So they've matched up in the playoffs, I want to say, the last 2 years, or at least 3 out of the last 4 years. Toronto has the fortunate benefit of being in the same division as the 2 best teams in the East, and Tampa Bay and Boston. So they get fucked by this playoff format and get to play Boston in the first round every year. A part of me wants to say Toronto finally gets over that hump and gets by Boston. Boston historically has given them fits, but I don't see it happening. I think Boston, once again, takes care of business. And that one could go 7, but I got Boston in 6.
I had Boston in 7. I think that of the games I see that could possibly go 7, like we talked about, I think San Jose Vegas is almost definite, and then I think Boston Toronto is.
Yeah, and I would put Winnipeg St. Louis in there too for me.
Yeah, maybe.
We'll see.
And then So let's do the last two. So Washington Capitals and Carolina.
Yeah, this has the makings of an interesting series. Obviously, the Capitals are the defending champs, but if you take away last year, really even last year, the Caps struggled the first round as well. I mean, it took them 7 games to take care of Columbus, and historically, Washington has had a very, very hard time in the first round. A lot of times, they end up going 7 games against bad teams. No, not bad teams. Obviously, any team that makes playoffs is not bad, but against teams they should beat. In Carolina, on the other hand, hasn't been in the playoffs in like 10 years. The celebration that they undertook when they finally got in was something to see. And they're, of course, known for their post-game celebrations, right? That Don Cherry and Hockey Night in Canada can't stand. And they've been labeled a bunch of jerks now. But I definitely see upset potential in this series just because Carolina's riding a high, and anytime you're the defending champ, putting Pittsburgh aside, there tends to be sort of a hangover, and there's not the same drive to win again. And you've played more hockey than anyone the last 12 months.
Yeah.
So I think Washington takes care of it, but I would not be surprised at all if Carolina pulls that off.
I'm right there with you. The hockey fan in me wants wants Carolina to win for sure.
Yeah.
Not only because you've got how long has it been since they made the playoffs, but the bunch of jerks. I'd love to see Don Cherry right. I'd love to see them win the Stanley Cup. Honestly, there wasn't a chance the Sharks would win it. Just so, in fact, if they go and the Sharks don't go, I'll root for them. Just so Don Cherry can watch them celebrate as they hoist a cup.
Which I will say though, I'm gonna laugh when somebody on their team gets hurt in one of those celebrations. They got a little excessive. But
this dunking was the one that I was like, man.
Yep, I thought that guy was gonna turn his ankle
for sure. But I've got Washington in 6. I think they'll take care of it. Like you said, I think they'll struggle. I think Carolina has a lot to prove, and they're going to give them a run for their money. But I think Washington manages it in 6.
And that leaves the New York Islanders, probably the biggest surprise of all these teams in the playoffs. Especially John Tavares leaves town. Everybody's like, oh, God, they're going to be a lottery team. No one expected them to be here. So it's a compliment to them that they even got in the playoffs, and they have home ice against Pittsburgh. So that's their reward. They get to play Pittsburgh, which Pittsburgh has not been very good this year, but still it's hard to dismiss, their recent success, obviously. And anytime you're going up against Crosby and Malkin, that's not an easy task.
So what do you got?
I think Pittsburgh, I wouldn't even call this an upset. I mean, it is according to the seeding, but this is the only upset I have in the first round. It's Pittsburgh over the Islanders in 6 games.
Yeah, I've got Pittsburgh over Islanders. I've got 7. So I've actually picked three games in the first, or 3 series in the first round that are going to go 7. And I think it'll be fun. Actually, I think Pittsburgh, New York will be fun to watch. It's never fun for me to watch the Sharks because it's too much.
Yes, it's just torture. Yeah,
too much stress.
But the playoffs are great when you're watching somebody else. When you're watching your own team, it's horrible.
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy the Boston series. I'm going to enjoy the Pittsburgh series as a fan watching hockey. And then I'm going to hide behind my couch while I watch the Sharks play.
And I think San Jose Vegas probably will be the best series. There's a couple others that have potential, but I think that's the most even matchup on paper. So,
and I guess we don't have to go on. We can do next round after we see who's actually in it.
Well, I think if we want to call ourselves an expert, we got to make our picks now, and we can readjust as the rounds happen here.
Let's go through them then. So second round, we both got Calgary and San Jose.
Yeah, me too.
I've got San Jose winning it. I didn't pick a number of games, but I think you're again in the 6 region for.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about games. I'll say San Jose takes care of Calgary too.
And then I've got Nashville, St. Louis, and you've got Nashville, Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I think either way Nashville wins, but I definitely got them over St. Louis.
Yep, I got Nashville over Winnipeg, so that leaves San Jose and Nashville in the conference final for both of us.
And this is where I stopped being a fan for a minute.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Nashville takes out Sharks in the conference finals.
Yeah, I for everybody listening, I'm a Sharks fan, and I want the Sharks to win, but I think this is where they lose. I think it's gonna be part of it for me is that I think that both Vegas and Calgary are going to be long series. They're going to be tough series for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're going to be just exhausted when they get into the conference finals. I also don't know if Carlson will even, if Carlson has to play 12 or 13 games before
I'm hoping he makes it through the first round, let alone conference finals. But all right, so we both got Nashville representing the West. In the East, let's see, so that would mean Tampa Bay and Boston I would have in the second round.
Me too.
Stick with Tampa Bay.
Me too.
And then the other matchup I have is Washington-Pittsburgh. I'm going to go with Pittsburgh. So that would mean Tampa and Pittsburgh for me.
I'm going to go Washington. But again, I think it'll be a long series.
And you have Washington versus Pitt as well?
Yeah, I have Washington versus Pitt as well. I think I have Washington. I think they pull it out against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's had trouble the last few seasons when they go further rounds. I think they're a little bit of I don't want to say tired team, but they look a little tired out there when they get
a lot of hockey the last few years. So.
Yeah. So I think Washington. So I think it's Washington, Tampa Bay. I'm guessing you have Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh, but I'm guessing we both have the same outcome of those games.
Tampa, yeah.
Yeah. So we both have Tampa and Nashville for the final, and then I think it's Tampa's Cup this season. But
I agree. So we just agree too much. But I don't know. It's hard with these picks. Like I want to do some upset picks, but realistically, I can't see it happening. And I want to say though, if you're a betting man and you really want to make some money, bet on Columbus to beat Tampa Bay in the first round. You're probably going to lose your money, but if you happen to be right, I got to imagine the odds are pretty good on that one.
I was going to check out. So I am a betting man. I was actually going to check out what the line on Carolina is. Because I think that
definitely has a real chance of happening.
Yeah. Sure. I think that's one that just based on rankings, your odds would be really in favor of Washington. But I think if you're going to bet on a wild card to win, I think that might be the one to bet on.
Yeah, I would say either Carolina or St. Louis. But the odds on St. Louis probably aren't very good because those teams are 1 point apart in the standings. So.
But I'm going to be happy when we're both proven wrong and the Sharks go all the way and take the Stanley Cup. And
yeah. Like I said earlier, I would not be surprised at all if Vegas takes care of us. But I hope that is not the case, and I'm going to stay optimistic. But
I hope you at least get to play Nashville so you can go to some games. And,
yeah, I don't know if I can. We'll see. See what ticket prices are and how the boys look before I make that decision. But if not, if they get to the conference finals, I have 1 game per round guaranteed anyway as part of my Shark Pack. So if they advance to the conference finals, I'll fly back and watch them in San Jose regardless. And then we'll see if I watch an additional game in Nashville if that happens. But
you'd probably be the only Sharks fan in Nashville.
I'm sure there will be some, but not as many as one would hope. That's for sure. So we will reconvene. I don't know if we'll probably not next weekend, probably the weekend after, which will mean we will have the results of the first round. So we'll either be doing the Sharks eulogy or previewing a second round versus either Calgary or Colorado. So
yeah, unfortunately, I think it's going to be hard to schedule for next week. So we'll have to wait till after. But that means we'll be talking about our second round preview against.
For that, we'll be talking about who to take off the roster for next year.
One of the two. Either way, it'll be a great show next time. There may be some crying.
Our scene are very optimistic because if we beat Vegas, then my optimism shoots through the roof.
Yeah, for sure. If you tune in and we've lost to Vegas, bring your tissues because we're gonna all be crying. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in today. Those of you that tuned in live, if you're listening to us on the podcast, please give us some type of rating and review. Let us know how we're doing. We're definitely interested in improving. So any advice you have, and if you love it, then share it with your friends. Follow us on Twitter at Sharks Talk 916. I'm usually tweeting during games. Sometimes Nolan tweets during games. You can tell by if there's 20 tweets or 3. And check out our blogs. In fact, I think we both should probably write something, and then during the playoffs here on Sports Talk 916. We just revamped the website. It looks a lot nicer, and we both like to write stuff on there. That's about it for Shark Talk 916. For Nolan and Chad, signing off. Take it easy,
Grow your
guys.
playoff beards. All right, guys.